Good evening, morning, night, whatever it is with you, and welcome to the Kitesurf question answer session. For the next hour, I will be answering your kitesurfing questions. So the format is really simple. All you need to do, I assume you're watching this on YouTube. I'm not sure it actually is out anywhere else at the moment anyway. So all you need to do, if you've got a question to ask, stick it in the chat box on the right-hand side of the video. Stick it in there and I will answer it, basically. The chat on this is really good. There's not too much of a delay. I think it's about a 5-second delay. So I will see your question eventually, and the chat seems to work really well. So that should all be good. It does have a 200 character limit. So if YouTube's not accepting it, just try and hone it down a little bit, or split it into 2 or 3 parts so you can get through the whole question. And as soon as I spot it, I will get to it and answer it. If for whatever reason I don't answer your question, sometimes they don't appear first time. I'm not sure if it's an internet issue or what, but sometimes they just don't appear. So if I seem to be ignoring you, it's not intentional. Just put your question in again, just copy and paste it back in, and hopefully I'll see it the second or at least the third time. So it's not that I'm ignoring you. It's that simply it doesn't often register them straight off the bat. So as always, any questions, stick them in the chat. I'll work through them as we go and hopefully get through them all. Now, there are a few things few questions in the hopper to start with. There was a lot of discussion this week in the group. That's our Facebook group, which you're not a member of, go and join. .com/groups/Tantrum Kitesurf. There we have kind of discussions all the time in there, and it's all kite surfing, all good stuff. So go and join that. I'm assuming a lot of you here are probably from the group, however. But if you're watching this on YouTube afterwards, then go and watch it over there. Go and catch up with us over there. It will be awesome to see you in the group. So, as I said, we were talking this week a lot in the group about knees, not kite surfing, knees, yes. No, but knees and kite surfing, as in, I've got bad knees. What can I do to help my kite surfing? Because, often going kite surfing hurts your knees. Now, this is something that's quite close to my heart. It's something that I suffered with for quite a while. One knee, particularly my right knee, when I went kite surfing for a long time, especially when I hadn't been for a long time, it wasn't like I couldn't walk, but it would just flare up and was really painful for like the next week. So the first few things you can do, the obvious ones, is check your pads and straps. Check they're fitting right. Don't just go with the default setting. Don't assume the manufacturer knows who you are. The pads and straps can be adjusted quite a lot on most boards these days. So play around with that. Now, it's not for me to sit here and tell you what setup is right. There are plenty of guides out there which you can use. Now, indeed, there's one in the Facebook group which is really good, like a kind of infogram, which talks you through it. But at the end of the day, they are guides only. The best guide is for you to adjust your pads and straps until they don't make your knees hurt, or until it hurts a lot less. That's the best tip I can possibly give you, because we're all different. And what works for you will almost certainly not work for me. And it's not a hard and fast rule that, because you're taller or have longer legs, you necessarily need a wider stance. It doesn't work like that. Some people who are very tall prefer a smaller stance, a narrower stance. Some people who are very short prefer a wider stance. It's nothing to do with that. It's more to do with how your body is put together. So that's the first thing I would say. Really play around with your pads and straps every single session until you get comfortable. Change the position until you find, that's the one that works for me the best. Second one that you can kind of use to accelerate that process is ride a strapless board and look where your feet naturally fall. Because you will notice on a strapless board, well, God, I've got a much wider stance than I've noticed on a twin tip stance, or I'm much narrower naturally, and it's really comfortable. That ability to move around on a strapless board really makes a big difference. It makes a huge difference, because suddenly, you're free to move around and you realize, well, my natural stance is actually very different to my twin tip stance. So that's another really good way of just getting, and again, it's a guide only, but you can just kind of play it in to playing around with the straps to give you a bit more of an idea of maybe first of all, I'll try opening the stance, because you've got a wide strapless stance. The other thing, obviously, is the stuff that you can do off the water. Now, this is almost endless, but the one thing that I will say that really, really helped me was a visit to an amazing podiatrist. Now, basically, I've been walking all my life wrong. And I knew this, but I've been to various different podiatrists, and none of them have been able to tell me, or they'd all told me totally different things, until this guy just basically stood in front of me, adjusted me slightly, and suddenly all the pain disappeared. Most of it, having spoken to him, and I'm going to do a podcast with him as well, because it was so enlightening, because literally I came back and it's also, after a couple of months, has transformed the way that I kite. Suddenly my balance has massively improved. And who would have guessed, because suddenly my body's straight. You know, whereas before it was all wonky and lopsided, now it's straight. So your balance improves, and it's a noticeable effect on the water. So that's the other one I could really, really say. And speaking to him, as I said, I'm going to do a podcast with him, but speaking to him, he was saying that, you know, most people, most of us, by the time we're kind of 30, 35, are walking wonky. And it obviously, because of how much you walk, you know, every time you step, you're kind of re-ingraining that bad stance, and it's shooting up your entire body. Your feet are the foundations. So that's what I found really, really worked for me. And again, I would imagine, and having spoken to a lot of people about this since, that this is something that quite a lot of people suffer from, and especially as us kite surfers, because where does our sport hit us? Ankles, knees, hips, all of the things that are involved when you walk. I mean, it went much higher than that. It took me to my shoulders. My shoulders used to be really wonky. Now they're still wonky, but a lot less wonky. So that's the other one I would say, is look at the stuff you're doing off the water. I mean, there's tons that we could talk about there, but that's the real big one that I've noticed personally. I've noticed in a few people I work with as well, because a few of my clients in my kind of performance business, we've done the same treatment with them, and they've gone, wow, you know, the effect that this has in your day-to-day life, but in your kite surfing is incredible. So that would be another thing I would say with the knees. Right, now there's a comment in here. Hang on a minute. I can see there's questions coming in, but I cannot. Bizarre. Can't scroll to see them. There we go. There we go. Space Anubis, how are you, sir? Good to have you here. Yeah, absolutely. Sorry, just for those of you watching elsewhere, probably on the replay, Space Anubis asks, I'm still a beginner, so strapless board is going to be hard. I do surf, though. Could I observe my stance on a surfboard and try to apply that to my straps and pads on my kiteboard? I would say, yeah, obviously it's going to be slightly different, but you will still probably notice the same tendencies on a surfboard as you would notice on a kite surfboard. Now, the distribution of force is quite different on a surfboard to that on a kite surfboard, simply because you're being powered by the wave and by gravity, not by a kite, which changes the dynamics quite significantly. However, I definitely would have a look at how you ride on a surfboard. Now, a surfboard is naturally a wider stance anyway. You know, there we go. It's not me, by the way, that's a ship. Obviously a bit of fog out there. Ooh, a bit more fog. So you're going to have a wider stance naturally on a surfboard anyway. So don't take that as gold standard, but what you may want to do is compare your stance to other people who are about your size and see if you are wider naturally or narrower naturally than them. And that might start giving you some indications for your stance. But again, probably a better one will be just to start adjusting, and then just adjust your straps based on that to start with. That would be the way that I would start. Okay, I've noticed I have a slightly wider stance when I surf than other people my size and build. Hence, I will start by widening my pads and straps, would be the way that I would look at that. But yeah, surfing is significantly different in the way the power is distributed and where the power comes from. You know, this is kind of the important thing in kitesurfing, is that your power is driving down through your harness, down through your legs. Whereas in surfing, it's a very different way that it's being transmitted because of where the power's coming from, and the power's being generated by the wave, and to a certain extent as you're ploughing down the wave by gravity. So it's a slightly different mechanic. So yes, but in that sense, I wouldn't say just because I've got a wide surf stance, I'm definitely going to have a wide twin tip stance. Might not translate like that simply because of the power variance. And this is why kite surfing is probably, you know, harder on the knees than, let's say, surfing, because the power is being transmitted through your body. So your knees act as suspension, but they've also got to be this kind of power conduit. They've got to transmit the power themselves. And of course, if they're totally floppy, you lose all that power. So you need to have a certain amount of stiffness in your knees to transmit the power whilst keeping them loose enough so that they don't just get blown out straight away. So yes and no would be the answer to that one, Space Anubis, I would say. Unhelpfully so, I'm afraid. But yeah, go and adjust your foot straps for sure. And I would say it's a bit of a pain to start because some of the foot straps and some of the boards don't adjust that easily. I have nightmares about adjusting pads and straps on boards. But it's definitely worth it to protect your knees, especially while you're getting used to it. You know, once you've done it, once you've found your setting, then you'll be able to apply that setting across every single different board. I like a wide, you know, 17-degree angle on my pads. Perfect. Okay, we'll just set that up every single time. But to get there and to understand that is definitely worth a bit of experimentation, for sure, for sure. So that's what I would say there. And again, look at how, you know, just look at how you walk is another really, really good tip for this. Some people walk like this. Some people walk like this. And that's going to get, and everything in between, you know, that's going to give you a really good indication of what kind of duck foot angle your pads and straps should be at. You know, I had a mate who walks literally like that. I can get my hands back as far as his feet are when he walks. And for him, anything under kind of 45 degrees. So his straps, you know, he had to literally drill holes in the board and put new inserts in so he could get the straps wide enough where it was comfortable for him. So don't be afraid to kind of experiment with this as well. You know, boards, as with everything, are built for the 95th percentile. They will not accommodate people who are at the top or the bottom end of any scale. So if you need to adjust them specifically for you, you may well need to do that for sure. And to get the inserts drilled into a board, I think it's about 20 euros an insert. So it's not a lot. You know, you can do the whole board for less than 100 euros if you need to. So that's another option as well. Don't be afraid to play around with it a little bit as well. So I hope that helps, Space Anubis. Cool, informative, good, glad to hear it. So we've reached that time. I can babble on for ages, as you know, but any more questions, stick them in the chat and we will get started. It looks like the whole foil adventure is about to start out again. Hopefully, the only problem is here we've got honking Levante at the moment, which is awesome, but not necessarily the best for someone of my level in foiling, simply because, and this is something I've learned this last week, is that a lot of people lose foil boards here in Levante. So, so I'm definitely not going to do that with your board, Paige. If you're watching this, do not worry. I am going to have it absolutely locked down. There is no way I'm losing that baby. Touch wood, touching all available wood in every single place. We'll see. Matt, how's it going, sir? How are you? Hey Sam, I'm stuck. I'm at the Holy Grail. I'm after the Holy Grail of higher jump. Seem to be stuck at 5 or 6 meters, whatever conditions. Flat water, ramps, under or overpowered. Any tips to creep higher? Cheers. This is a great question, Matt. And this is actually something as well that's come up a fair few times in the group over the last few months. Because it's a really common problem. Why is it a common problem? Because jumping is a really, really, really easy art to do. Really easy. That doesn't make any sense, does it? It's a really, really easy trick to learn. It's a very, very, very difficult trick to master. Why? Because it becomes all about timing. You know, just to jump off the water is very easy. You just yank the kite and pull, you know, and you'll go. Might not be very graceful, but you will jump. You know, whereas to actually get it all perfect, what you are, you know, you see these guys who are jumping 30 meters on their woo. Although I just read that the world record, or someone broke the world record, and it's just been disqualified because he was cheating. I'm not exactly sure how he was cheating. but I think the world record has been slightly changed these last few days. So it might still not be the same. It might have changed slightly from that. But anyway, I'm babbling. What those guys are doing is they've basically addressed each individual point of it. So what you'll find is that they're moving the kite as fast as they possibly can, whilst being able to maintain the edge. They are timing the kite hitting the zenith with them hitting the lip of the ramp that they're looking at. You know, they're then flying the kite perfectly in the air. You know, probably with loops, down loops, things like this to keep them up to get the hang time. Having the right form in the air is important as well, because this is something that often people fail in. Is, you know, they start spinning out under the kite as they get more height. So you've got to really lock your body in, and a really easy way to do that is to do a kind of a tail grab when you're in the air. So it kind of locks your body in under the kite, and you don't start spinning. So, and then obviously you can start including the timing of the pop. So, you know, you're accelerating perfectly downwind to carve back upwind, hitting the lip at the right time. And all these different facets need to be timed perfectly. Now, which one should you work on? Well, it's really, really difficult to say, because without sort of analyzing your jump technique as it is, it's difficult to say which one you're doing. What my suggestion and what we've seen is that it's all of them. You know, a really, really easy tip to jump higher initially is take out a slightly smaller, maybe 9 powered, but take out a slightly smaller kite so you can fly it faster. Now you won't get as much hang time, but you will probably get a higher boost, because you can whip that kite up and it will really rip you off the water. You get higher, but you'll come down more like a sack of potatoes. So that might be something you want to try. So it's not necessarily a case of going bigger, 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 because obviously bigger, you think, oh, this is going, I'll go stupidly big. But what happens then is, as you send the kite, it goes slow, but bigger kites naturally pull harder. You know, they're tractors. So as you're moving the kite, you get ripped off your edge. It's very, very difficult to hold down the edge. So the key really is the board control. It's keeping that edge engaged while you send the kite. And the better you can do that, the higher you're going to jump. Now, a lot of people will actually find that easier on a slightly smaller kite than maybe they think they're supposed to be taking out. You know, most people go the other way. I'll get bigger and bigger and bigger. But certainly what I've seen is when I do that, is it's so hard to hold down an edge, because you're getting pulled downwind before the kite hits the zenith. And that's what destroys most jumps, because you're trading your upward momentum for downwind momentum. And that's not what you want. You want to have all that locked in, held down by the edge, and then when you want to release it, boom, it goes. So that's what I find is the most challenging part about going big. It's holding that edge down in contrast to the kite. You know, often in overpowered conditions, it's super, super easy to jump and you can hang there for ages. But to get high, to get the real height when you're super overpowered, isn't as easy. Especially if the water's slightly choppy, as it often is when you're overpowered, because obviously the wind is creating the chop, then it makes it difficult, because you're being kicked off your edge on every single little ramp that you hit before you hit your major, before you hit the bit of swell. So that would be kind of my advice, is to, it's going to be everything. If you're getting 5 or 6 meters consistently, now you can jump. You know, you've got the fundamentals in there. What you need to do is tweak each individual part of it to perfection. So, you know, your pop needs to be perfect. You want to be popping kind of, 2 or 3 meters without even using the kite. Perfect. That's a great start. Okay, that's got you 2 or 3 meters sorted straight away. Then you need to be using the right kite in the right conditions at just the right speed, with just the right power, on the perfect ramp, with the wind in the perfect direction, so you can hit the ramp at the right angle. All these things go into it, preferably with perfect flat water in front of the ramp, so you can hit the ramp and have the edge fully engaged. So it's an awful lot of different things. There's no one thing that I would say at this point that's going to make all the difference. The other thing I would look at is look at where your bar is. A lot of people have a tendency when they're when they are jumping, because they don't want to come off the edge. They massively sort of hoik the bar out just before they jump. So you're riding along, you know, you're engaging the edge, you're engaging the edge, you're engaging. Oh, I'm going to lose it. Right, I need to let the power off. And that kind of kills your jump before it starts. So you want to be holding the power in as far as you can, really. You still give yourself some distance to pull in, but you want to be max powered, engaging that edge as hard as you possibly can, so that you're not doing that to then do this, if that makes sense. Because that's what, and that's what I used to do. You know, I'd hold the edge, I'd hold it, damn, I've gone too much. There's too much power in the kite. I've got to let some off. And at that point, you kind of know, well, this is going to be a bit of a damp squid now. So it's getting that whole balance between how much you can hold down, how much the kite's going to pull. And that's obviously determined by how high the kite is as well. And as the kite moves up, it becomes harder to hold that edge down, because the kite is now pulling you off the edge as it gets higher. So it's and this is kind of what I'm trying to say, is that it's a real art at this point. It's the fine tuning of all these separate points, which will lose weight to. Yeah, maybe. Or, you know, if you weigh more, put a bigger kite. Yeah, that could be one. But certainly get more leg strength, you know, because that will enable you to hold that edge down a little bit more. You know, just driving the edge in with that back heel is what you're aiming for. You know, another one, you know, you could look at your board. You know, it depends what board you're in. Your board will have the one thing that struck with me from my conversation with the stars when I sit down and spoke to Aaron Hadlow many moons ago. I asked him this question. You know, I said, you know, what for someone who is looking to jump, what's the one bit of advice you would give them to jump higher? And he said, concentrate on the board. Forget about the kite. The board is the most important thing in jumping high. Sorry. So this is the other thing you might want to focus on. Look at your board. You know, how is your board set up for jumping? Would you, if you're trying to jump on a massive door style board, you're going to struggle to hold the edge down for long enough and with enough power before you get ripped off, you know. So a smaller board might suit you better for jumping high, because you can hold it down as the kite's going up and really hold on to that power until you're ripped up. You might want to look at bigger fins, you know, because again, if you've got small fins and you're riding along, you're much more likely to be pulled downwind and ripped off the edge as the kite moves up. So there's all these other factors that you can look at as well, as opposed to just the things that you normally think about. And this is why kiting's so awesome, because you think, oh, this, you know, it's just jumping, and then you actually start to analyze it, and my God, there's so many facets to it actually. And I say the one tutorial I really love on this is Lewis Crathon's, and I've said this a few times. If you haven't seen that one, he's done a YouTube series, and if you just stick in YouTube search from like jump Lewis Crathon, or jump tutorial, or jump coaching with Lewis Crathon, something like that. And he's got, I don't know, it's about an 8-series video thing that goes through. And he's obviously really good at kitesurfing. He's the guy who jumped the Brighton Pier, so he knows what he's talking about. But he's also a very good coach, and he's broken it down really well into all these different factors that you're going to find really useful. So I definitely advise you to go and watch that. Again, look at all these different factors. Look at your board. Your board could well be the one thing that's stopping you here if you've tried everything else. Again, especially if you're riding a bigger board or something with smaller fins, something like that, you know, a beginner's board particularly, or I don't want to call it a beginner's board, but, you know, the board that you use as a beginner, sort of the 140s, 145, something like that, you might want to try a smaller board, because then you will be able to hold down a hell of a lot more power with that. So that would be another thing I would say on that one. yeah, Crathon is awesome. Yeah. Go and check that out. Mastery again. Yeah, unfortunately so. Yeah, it always comes back to this: practice the same thing over and over again. Mr. Miyagi style. Yeah, for sure. So do I not jump until kite at the zenith? Right. If you're not waiting until the kite's at the zenith, you're probably, again, this is when it comes down to perfect timing. You know, I've heard people saying that you need to wait till the kite's slightly past the zenith. Now, the problem then is that you tend to pendulum under it, but then you've got to bring it back down very quick. Now, the way I would say to do this is, yes, you want to wait till the kite's at the zenith. Why? Because if you go earlier, you are being pulled downwind rather than up. And think about it, you know, as the kite is coming up, it's kind of coming up from here, but it's coming backwards towards you almost as well, slightly. So as soon as if it's say 11 o'clock, it's still in front of you. It's not above your head. So you're going to be translating some of your upward pull for downwind pull, which isn't what we want. We want to translate all that force, all that speed, all that power to go up, not to go down. Yeah, so wait till 11, wait till 12 o'clock. I mean, it might be, again, the exact timing of this you'll need to work out, but it's when it is kind of just hitting the zenith, boom, that's when you want to go. So yes, if you're doing it too early, that will certainly be causing problems. Yeah, and practicing jumps is always fun, mate, isn't it? Practicing jumps is always fun. It's never something that's a chore, really, is it? But it is annoying when you get stuck at a certain point, for sure. For sure. But is this sort of 5 to 10 meters is kind of the point where a lot of people really, really get stuck, because it's this kind of, yeah, I can jump, yeah, I can do this. And people then just get into the, right, okay, I can jump, what's next? Whereas, yeah, you see the guy, you know, the king of the airs, and they're the guys that, well, okay, that's great, but how do I really, really fine tune this to be something that's awesome? And that's what, as in all sports, separates the masters from the mere mortals. So, yeah. Okay, guys, any more questions? Hello, Chroma Tarifa. How are you, sir? How much is weight to factor in jumping? That's a bloody good question, actually, mate. I would personally say it's probably a huge factor. Now, to justify that, I wouldn't be able to, or I would struggle to go much further than that, to be honest. But given that weight is a huge factor in kite surfing in general, I would say it probably is a factor. How that factor affects you, I would say, is more a case of how it affects your relationship with the kite. I wouldn't even say bigger kite, mate. I would probably say different kite. You know, let's say, and there was a really good example of this in the group the other day. I can't remember who it was, but someone had gone from a switch kite to a dice, to a North dice. And they were saying, look, there's just no power. It's the same size kite, but there's no power in the dice. And this goes back to that chat I had with Mike, where he was saying, look, you know, different kites are built for different people. This is why when you see a couple, and we see this all the time, you know, and they've got a set of Cabrini switchblades is the classic, because the switchblade is the classic kind of power kite. You know, it's the truck of a kite. And the bloke, you know, the big sort of 90 kg bloke is perfect. He loves this kite. And it scares the bejeebus out of his tiny 50 kilo wife. So she goes and buys, you know, I don't even know an example of this one, but, you know, let's just pick one out of an Aeros Razor, for example, which is designed, you know, the Siren, buys a Siren kite, or the Aeros Diamond, which is designed for women. She goes and buys that one and loves it. Loves it. That's all intents and purposes. It's not a huge difference from that to the Switchblade, but the husband cannot even ride on it, because it's got no low-end grunt. So it doesn't even get him out of the way. It's like, this thing's awful. You know, it's just a terrible kite. You know what you're talking about? This is the best kite in the world. It's your kite that's rubbish. And this is why when you see couples sharing, you often find that one of them does really well and the other one just really, really struggles, because that kite has been built for a heavy person, or has been built for a light person. And this is when people, you know, hear a lot of people speaking very disparagingly about the ladies' kites, you know, the Siren, the Diamond, things like that. And actually, they're really, really, it's not clever, but it's it is a fundamental shift between those kites. You know, they're a very different kite because they've been designed specifically for lighter people who need a lot less grunt to get them out of the water. So I would say, again, I would make an educated guess and say that carries over into jumping mass. I mean, obviously that's going to carry over into jumping, but I would say that's probably the biggest factor in jumping, is how well equipped your kite is for your weight, so to speak, rather than the fact that you're, you know, a heavier person can't jump as high. I wouldn't necessarily agree with that, because, you know, a heavier person can hold down more power, can take out a more powerful kite, has more weight to fling back to hold down the edge, and can still ride a small board and get away with it. So I'm not sure that weight will obviously have an effect on jumping for sure. I wouldn't say I'm qualified enough in aerodynamic theory and kite design yet to fully answer that, mate, though. But it's a really good question. It's something I will definitely ask the experts next time I speak to them, for sure. So yeah, good question, mate. Good question. Mike, how are you, sir? 50 years old, 120 kilos, and have just got up on the board after a couple of months of practicing. Awesome. I always find myself stuck in the poo stance and don't know how to progress. Any questions? Any suggestions? Yes, mate, start to shag. Start to shag. That's what you're going to do. Get those hips forward into that shagging stance that we like. But seriously, what do you do? Okay. Few things you can do. The first one, the easiest one, is actually to stick on a waist harness. Now, if you're not wearing a waist, if you're wearing a seat harness facilitates the poo stance because the pull comes from our bum, basically. So it kind of, the brain thinks, okay, the way to hold down the power is to stick the bum out further, which leaves the head in front of the board, which, as you've probably realized, leaves you in all sorts of trouble because your head is the heaviest object, so you fall over the front of the board. And what you want to actually do is stick your hips forward into that shagging stance, which gets your head behind the board, which means that you've got a counterbalance in your head, especially when you've got a massive head like I've got. You know, you really need to get your head back over the board. If it's in front of the board, you're off the front. Okay, so the first one is maybe check your harness. Maybe just try a waist harness and see if that helps. We've seen some people, they stick a waist harness on, because what a waist harness does, if you try and poo, it comes up under your armpits straight away, and it's mega uncomfortable, but it's also instant feedback. I was doing it wrong. So you tend to remember. Also, you know, suddenly sitting down on the harness, it doesn't work in the same way because the harness just rides up and it doesn't control the power. So for some people, that short circuits the poo stance. Again, not always, but for some people that really works. So that is the first thing I would say. The second one, nipples. Think about your nipples. Now, what you're aiming to do is get your nipples pointing in the direction that you want to go at. If you're in the poo stance, that's actually really uncomfortable. You know, it's very kind of simian as a movement. And if you just try it, you know, drop into the poo stance and spin yourself around, it just, oh my God, this just doesn't feel right. And this is why most people in the poo stance are actually just stood forward, because to get around here suddenly is really, really, well, I mean, even now I can feel it. My right knee is just hurting. You know, it's a really, really uncomfortable position to be in. Whereas as soon as you get your hips forward and get your nipples around, it's really easy. Why? Because it locks out your back hip. It locks this right hip. And this is where kitesurfing differs from, say, wakeboarding, because what you're aiming for, your nipples have spun, your hips are forward, so you've got a solid line going from your right armpit down to your right heel, pretty much. And it's not in a line, but you've got this whole side of your body is a solid block, and this back hip is pushing forward to facilitate getting your nipples around. And suddenly that's a really comfortable position. Yeah. So this is the other thing else. Concentrate on your nipples. Slightly obscure, but get your nipples around. Because kite surfing is very different to, say, snowboarding. You know, kite surfing, actually everything is initiated from your head. So the other way you can think of it, rather than nipples, is look where you're going. You know, and as long as your shoulders follow your head, then you'll be all right. Because again, it's very uncomfortable to go like this. It just feels wrong. And this whole back leg already, I mean, even without a board, it just feels like it's kind of twisted. And if you're doing that at home, you can probably feel it. This whole back hip, it just doesn't, you know, and you look down, your knees bent in at this weird angle. Because as soon as you straighten and lock this back hip, that goes away. And that's our base for this power transmission that I'm talking about in kite surfing, is this locked back hip. It's locked forward, and it's locked straight and pushed forward. And that's what conducts the power down through our body, so to speak. But I'll come to you in a minute, John. I'll just finish up here with Mike. So I'm using a waist harness, right? Okay, cool. But should I power up the kite as I turn the upper body? No, it's nothing to do really in that sense with the power in the kite. What you've probably got, if you are post dancing, is you've probably got the kite too high. Because naturally in a post dance, you are riding with the board very flat. You have to be. There's no way you can engage that back rail because your head is in front of the board. So the board's going to be riding flat. So what you've probably got is the kite very high. So most people like to ride with the kite at 11 o'clock. Why? Because if I've got the board flat and I drop the kite where it wants to be, i.e., down towards the water, I just get pulled off downwind in a hurry. And this is where you see the people skid. So what you've got to do is drop the kite at the same time as you push the hips forward. Now, what does that do? It means as the kite drops, now, if you think about what would happen as I drop the kite, naturally, if my board is flat, it means I just get pulled off towards the kite because there's no grip. But if I straighten this back hip as the kite comes down, my board will naturally engage. And this is how you can ride upwind. This is why the best way to ride upwind is to have the kite as low as possible, so you can get the board in almost perpendicular. So the board's just is shooting upwind. Oh, I nearly broke my finger then. There's a wall there. Is shooting upwind from that point. So it's not so much as powering up the kite as turning the upper body. It's probably more dropping the kite and forcing those hips out. Yeah. Two ways to think about it. Get your hips forward, throw your head off the back of the board is the way. When I was a windsurfer, that's how I used to think about it. I'm not going to throw my hips forward. I'm going to get my head and just throw it off, because as long as I'm doing that, I can't, doing that in a post dance again, it feels like I'm trying to throw my head off. If I've got my hips forward, it's really easy back. And to understand why we're doing this, again, just do a little experiment. Again, drop into the post dance. Head is now in front of my knees. Now imagine someone pushing me from behind. I'm going to go forward. There's no other way I can go. So if I'm in this stance and the wind pulls me, I get pulled from the harness, I'm straight over the front. If I've got my hips forward and my head back and someone pushes me in the back, I just do that. I've got a counterbalance in place. So I can counterbalance the wind trying to pull me off the board. So this is why it's so important to get there, because then we can engage the edge. So keep using your waist harness. Push your hips forward as you come up. And again, the way to do that, upper body around. Don't worry to have the kite, try and have the kite about 45 degrees to start with, I would say. So don't worry about bringing it all the way down, but try and have it at 45 degrees. Certainly no higher, because higher than that is going to pull you up and off the edge anyway. So it's going to become more natural then to drop into the post dance, because suddenly it's safe to be there. Because, cool, this is fine. There's not a lot of power in the kite. I don't need a lot of power because the board's flat, but I'm only going downwind. Yeah, so bring the kite down slightly to 45 degrees, under control if you can, obviously. And then as you've got the kite at 45 degrees, head goes back and this side locks out. So the hip drives forward, nipples come around, head's looking. Yeah, this is why I say use your nipples, because you will be looking most probably at the damn kite. What's going on? What's going on there? Okay, fine, that's great. Have your head looking there, but get these nipples. So this is where it gets slightly awkward now. Nipples around, and you can still look at the kite, but have your nipples trying to point where they're going to go with that hip locked out. Yeah. So hope that was, again, if any comeback on that, mate, stick it in the chat, because this is the thing that a lot of people struggle with, to be fair. It's kind of the thing that you've got to go out there and practice. The biggest reason why I see people fail in this, to be perfectly honest, is they're trying too hard, or they're trying to do it before they're ready. Now, the way that I teach people, the way that I've always taught, is that, okay, if you're riding downwind in the poo stance and you're not yet too comfortable in that stance, just keep doing it, because your brain actually doesn't want to be in that stance. And what will happen naturally, without any instruction, is your brain will start working out how to get power on that heel. Because until you've got some power on that heel, on that rail, you're not in control. You are being controlled by the kite. So the big kind of, we struggled with teaching this for ages and ages until we realized actually, sometimes you've just got to keep riding downwind, and it just happens naturally. Once you can start, okay, get a bit of confidence, cool, this is cool. I can ride for 100 meters, 200 meters downwind, and I feel like I'm in control. Oh, let's try this. Let's try what that idiot on YouTube was talking about. Yeah, maybe he's talking, maybe I'll do something with my nipples and maybe it'll work. So that's the other thing as well. This kind of runs throughout kite surfing. You need to have the skills beforehand in place before pushing the next skills as well. So that's kind of another thing. May not apply to you. You may be perfectly comfortable with where you are, but don't just think, oh shit, I'm up on the board, I'm riding, and now I need to engage the edge. Yeah, you do, but it will also happen. And that's something that actually just happens naturally as well. And sometimes the more you force it, the harder it becomes. Cool, perfect, Mike. Good stuff. John, how are you, sir? We love Tarifa, but see the fear on beginners' faces. Needs to be a suitable location for my 3 and 5-year-olds too. I fully understand that. Yeah, Tarifa in the summer can be very, very intimidating for sure. So you asking me where would be a suitable location for your 3 and 5-year-olds? Well, that's how I'm going to take your question. That's how I'm going to answer. If it's another question, stick it in the chat and I'll answer that one as well. Suitable location for you, mate? Maybe Egypt. Egypt is probably a decent. I think you've got the whole family, haven't you? So it's you, your wife, and your 2 kids. So Egypt isn't a bad bet for that. Especially for teaching kids. Egypt. Why? Because there's all the other stuff as well there. It's kind of these 3, 4, 5-star inclusive. Oh, you asked one earlier. Sorry, mate. Oh, I've missed that. Oh, no. Here we go. I'm with you. Where in Europe would you say is the best place? Have I missed anything else? No, where in Europe would you say is the best place for an absolute beginner? I had lessons with you last summer and I'm doing great, but not sure truth. Yes, I remember you, John. How are you, sir? How are you? And you're flying now, aren't you? Aren't you up and cracked it, mate? I'm pretty sure I heard that the other day. So yeah, the two places that I always think are awesome for beginners in Europe. And again, the reason that we still run camps in Tarifa is because for me personally, and I'm just going to explain, I know you know this, John, I'm just going to explain this. The reason that we run camps in Tarifa is because personally, I think this is the best place to learn. Not because it's the easiest, but because it's probably the hardest. You learn in Tarifa, you can kite surf here, you can kite surf bloody anywhere. And that's not for everyone. And I say this to kind of advise people out there. It depends who you are and what you want to do with your kite surfing and how you want to learn. But the big problem that we see when we have down loops, good lad, well done, mate, well done. The big problem that we see with people who've say learned in Tarifa, and I've got a couple in mind that came to us a few years ago, and it was just horrible to see because they came, yeah, we can ride at wind. And we couldn't even get in a week because of this. We kind of start with, okay, cool, you start on the advanced course, la 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 la, and obviously they don't want to go back and practice the things that they've already learned. So we were trying to say, okay, well maybe we should do some body dragging. Maybe we should no, just give us the board, we'll go, we're cool. And this went on all week, and literally by the end of the week, they still weren't riding in Tarifa. It was just horrible, and it was no fault of their own, But what had happened is they'd learned in Egypt in these perfect conditions. Well, yeah, they could ride at wind, but they came to Tarifa where it's a lot more difficult, and suddenly they'd been knocked back a huge amount. And that psychologically was devastating to them. I mean, you could just see by the end of the week, they hated us. What's going on here? This is ridiculous. We're never coming back here or with you ever again. Which, I could fully understand at that point, fully understand their viewpoint. So, but this is why I do like Tarifa as a teaching location. It's not the easiest. The wind is very consistent here. Not consistently great, for sure. But you get out most days in a huge variety of conditions. But anyway, I digress. I'm just waffling about Tarifa. So, so where would I say to you? I always talk Egypt and Dakhla. Why? Because it's flat water. Very good instruction down there generally. Egypt, you are generally staying in like a 3, 4, 5-star all-inclusive hotel. So it's very good for the wife and kids just to kind of chill out, do their thing when they're not on the water. So that's one of the spots I would recommend. Daklar is the other. Daklar is a little bit more hardcore in that it is you're in the middle of the bloody desert, basically. So it's Daklar is quite often very kind of overcast in a way. It's hot, it's nice, it's warm, but it's not necessarily your kind of classic beach holiday weather. Certainly from what I've seen. I spent a fair bit of time in Dakar. When we were there, we didn't really see that kind of, clear blue skies. It was kind of always through this haze of what I assume is sand, basically, that's blowing over your head. So that's kind of what they're the two spots that I really, really big up for beginners. Why? Because it's flat water, super consistent wind, lagoons that you can walk out 500 yards and it's still only waist deep, so it's perfect for teaching. The other one I would actually look at, now coming back from it, is Alvor in Portugal. Very, very similar setup, but not quite so hardcore for the family in that, it's Portugal. There's tons to do with other stuff. You've got the whole Costa, the whole Algarve, down there as well. There's tons of stuff to do. No wind danger. You can go and do surfing. There's the whole west coast. So I certainly wouldn't overlook Alvor. The great spot. I had an amazing time there this summer. And the schools literally teach off sandbanks in a lagoon. And the instructors stood 500 meters in the middle of the water, and it's thigh deep. And he's just got his guy in front of him teaching the guy there. Now, the wind isn't quite as consistent there as in, say, Egypt or Dakar, I wouldn't say, but maybe a little bit more family friendly, because Egypt, you're kind of restricted to your hotel. Dakar is pretty similar. There's not a huge amount of other stuff to do there. Whereas Portugal, it's the Algarve. There's tons of stuff to do there. So that would probably be the other spot that I would look at, mate. That'd be my top 3 recommendations. Now, there are loads of others. Turkey, Gate Bay is great. These sort of places. But a lot of them are kind of being discovered, and beginner spots are quite difficult to come. It was a beginner. So that's another spot I would very much look at, mate. Obidos Lagoon, which is that? Is that the one in the north? Obidos, I'm not sure which. I'll know which one it is if you let me know, because I think I've seen pretty much all the lagoons in Portugal by now, but I'm not sure, because there's about 3 or 4 that I know of. Which is the Obidos one? Because there's the one right up on the border with Spain, and then there's one sort of just about half an hour south of Porto, and then there's another one kind of in between Porto and Lagos. Above Lisbon. Right, that is good. When I was there, if it's the same one I'm thinking of, which I think it is you've got an amazing beach. It's just an amazing surf beach, and then you've got a little river that runs through and the lagoon kind of opens up, and it's actually National Park lagoon. There's a school about 5k down the lagoon. If it's the same one I'm thinking of, when I was there, the locals weren't actually that amazed with the wind. They were saying that the wind starts in Portugal. It's either on the south coast or it starts up north of Peniche, isn't it? Peniche? Am I right in thinking that? The surf spot with super tubes, which I think is Peniche. They were saying that that's where it gets windy in Portugal. So those top two lagoons in the north are the windy lagoons. The one in the middle, it's amazing. And when it would be windy there, it would be absolutely incredible. But the locals, we had a chat with the school down there, and they were like, no, it's not that great for wind there. It's not the windy part of Portugal. That kind of middle bit of the coast, they were saying, generally isn't windy. It's the north of Portugal that tends to get the wind. Right, sorry, I'll go back and catch. What's the offshore spot in Portugal? Banhario. Banhario, mate. It's the one right next to the town, right next to the island. Very, very awesome spot. Very, very sketchy. Banhario, as in, I think it's Spanish for baths, basically, or bathing. Banhario. Peniche is the surf mecca. Yeah. So that's like the peninsula, isn't it? It's a bit like Tarifa is Peniche. You've got the old town on the island, and then the the new town behind it, sort of thing, with super tubes and the huge beach on the right hand side as well. Yeah, the locals were saying that the wind starts sort of just north of there is where the wind starts. So I would assume that's, you know, go to one of those two lagoons north. Where I stopped on the border with Spain looks amazing. It looks absolutely incredible. I can't remember what it was called. Villa de la Castilla, it could have been, or something like that. It was absolutely incredible. If there was no wind when I was there, and there was no wind forecast, but it looked amazing. If it was windy, it would have been one of the best spots I've ever seen in my entire life. Genuinely, it was brutal. Okay, I might miss a few here, guys. If I miss some again, just let me know and I'll go back and check. The pistol suck. How are you, sir? Sorry, very late. Did you get my question about surfboard tack? Ah, Paul. No, did I? Have you put it in before? Have I just missed it? Or was that in the group, mate? If no, just remind me, mate. Just remind me. It will be eventually, mate. It will be eventually. As I said, this whole quest hasn't got up to quite the start I was hoping for. It's still going though, and that is definitely where I'm looking for. That, or what's the other one? Navarre. We'll see. They look a little bit mean. I think even at the end of my quest, I think they might still be a little bit beyond me. But we'll see. We'll see. Surfboard tack. Sorry, Paul. No, I've missed that one, mate. So again, just stick that in. Posted. Oh, really? Okay, let me just double check. I should be able to see it. No, why isn't that? Where did you post it, mate? I can't see. Did you post it under the YouTube video? Under the video? I can't see it anywhere. Well, just post it again, mate, and I'll go through it now. Sorry about that. Start the circle for 6 months. Oh no, it hasn't shown up for some reason. Yes, sir. It's all coming. It's all back on track now. Well, I say that it's. I'll make an announcement about it later this week. It's been a fun few months, that's for sure. That's for sure. Obviously, as soon as you announce something like this, especially when you do it publicly, as I've done it, everything conspires to kind of throw a spanner in the works, which seems to be what's happening at the moment. But I always take these as signs that you're on the right track and you've just got to keep pushing through, and eventually it kind of opens up in front of you. So we'll get there. We'll get there. It's been a much slower start than I expected. I expected to be doing a hell of a lot more by this point than I actually am. But it's fine. I'm not in a rush. Oh, in the travel circle for 6 months. Change figure after the jibe, but tack up wind. Yeah, yes, mate, it is. Tack up wind is nigh on impossible. Yes, yeah. I'm assuming you asked for tips on tacking up wind. Mike, I'll come to you in a second. Let me just finish with Paul. And then I'll come back to that one, Mike. I've seen that one, Mike. I'll come back to it. It's a good question. Right. Okay. Cool. Good question, Paul. Few tips that I could give you here. Check your fins. How many fins are you riding on the surfboard? If it's anything over 3, and if the back fin, it's probably a technical name for it, the fin at the back is as big as the other 2, maybe consider changing down to having a smaller third fin. So having your 2 outside, your 2 thruster fins, and then your back fin, your tail fin, having it a little bit smaller, just makes the back end a bit looser. If you've got anything more than 3, you've got a quad fin set up, it's going to be very, very difficult to kick the board around, to start with especially. The way I learned this is I went down to 1 fin to start with, 1 small fin on the back, and it's a nightmare to ride the board, but it means that you can get that kick around a lot easier, because initially I was riding a quad fin setup and you just really struggled to kick it out. Nice one, John. Say hi to them from me. Right. Okay. Okay. The other thing I was going to say. So that's one thing. So if you're losing speed, it might just be that you're not kicking the board around enough. You have to kick the board around almost 180 in one movement. And if you're kind of getting it to 90, it might be that meet up yet with 3-foot thin thruster. Could be if you're struggling to kick, if you feel like you're struggling to kick the board, or maybe try it just once. Try taking the back fin out, and it'll be a nightmare. But just try it and see if suddenly it makes it easier. Because then you'd have the information. Okay, well maybe what I need to do is buy a smaller tail fin and use that on it to just give you that ability to kick the board around. So that would be the first thing I would suggest. Second thing, you need to actually carve into it generally. The mistake I was making for a long time is I was trying to really slow down into the turn. Now, what you find with attack is that it wants to be quite snappy, because there's that moment when where you need no weight on your feet so you can transfer it. And the way I actually often now, actually, it's almost a jump. It's almost a jump transition. I'm kind of in the air, repositioning my feet to land on the board. Why? Because at the point when you're turning, you kind of give a little pull on the kite as the kite moves over your head, and it lifts you up slightly, which gives you the time to get your feet into position on the new side. So that's another one. I was often trying very, very underpowered when I was first starting, because that's generally how I learn tricks. I go slightly underpowered and tried. And what I realized, actually, this doesn't work, because it's a very, very aggressive move. You drive in with power, you carve up wind, you use that kick of the board to stop your momentum as the kite comes over after you've kicked it, and just ride it out on the other side. Now, that all sounds really easy. It's not. It's a very, very complicated maneuver. And it also gets affected, obviously, with chop and things like that, which will make your life much more difficult. But those are kind of the two top tips that I've picked up from doing this, is that the kick around is probably the most important part. And by the sounds of it, if you're only kicking it around 90 degrees, right. Okay. In that case, what are you hanging out over the back? Right. Well, what I would say then is you're probably leaving it too late to kick the board out. Sounds like you're trying to carve. It's a very, very quick move. So you carve hard and then you slap it around. And the timing of the kite is crucial. So you're not aiming for the power of the kite. Oh, it's tough. Jesus Christ, it's hard, mate. Yeah, it's very hard. Yeah. I would say it's probably the hardest thing that I've learned in kite surfing in 13 years. I'd say I can do it, and I still fail quite a lot. Back roll, barely ever fail. Tacks, I fail often. So yeah, don't stress it, mate. It's bloody hard. It's bloody hard, especially in choppy water. If you're adding in choppy, when I was out in France, even then on flat water, it was tough, but it was a lot easier than here in Tarifa, where it's just perpetual chop generally. So yeah, it's not easy. It's not easy at all, and it's timing and it's everything. But the two things that I've really noticed, you really have to kick the board out. You really have to kick the board out, and if you cannot kick the board out hard enough, it's probably because you're not being aggressive enough with that carving and then slapping the board around. Really, really force it around, and try and have some loft in the kite as it comes over your head, so you've got the time to drop it back out again. I mean, I should be. Maybe I'm not. No, maybe I'm not. Maybe I'm back in the UK at that point. I think I'm in the UK. I'm back on the. Oh no, I'm back on the third. We've got a camp on the 13th, so I'm back for the 13th. But I do know I've got some time in the UK before that. But we will definitely, me and a couple of the lads from the group, as it sounds, will be a few lads from the group actually. We'll be rocking in Tarifa that week. So you will be there 13th and 14th on the beach on the 14th. So maybe see you there, mate, for sure. Right, where was Mike's question? Mike, and this will be the last one probably. So 120 kg Mike here again. I have 4 different kite sizes and found the biggest, the easiest to get up on. It's like a train. Should I try and use the smaller kites as others advised? You are always going to find big kites easier, mate. It's just the way it is. And this is something that took me a long time to learn. I remember teaching another chap called Mike, actually, who was a big guy, big South African guy, huge gorilla of a man. He won't mind me saying that. And we were, you know, start people small, short lines, la la la, keep it safe, keep it safe. And he just wasn't getting anywhere. And then one day we just look, bugger it. Let's just give him a 16-meter kite and see how he gets on with it. And he went from not water starting, he rode 200 meters. Boom. Like, this is so easy. He went back home and bought himself a 17-meter kite. And he rides that in winds where I'm riding a 12. So what I've seen bizarrely is that kind of last, I'm about 90. And that bit between kind of 100 kg and 120 kg, it's a huge difference in kite size. You know, where others are riding a 12, you might be riding a 14, 15, 16. You are going to love power. You're going to love big kites for sure. And the other guys telling you to use a smaller kite are probably smaller guys, I would have thought. You know, this was certainly my advice to people. You know, use smaller kites as you can. Then you realize actually for guys, for 110, 120, 130 kg guys, there's just no two ways around it. You just have to take out a big kite. It's just the way it is. So I would say stick with it. If you find it easier, mate, keep with it. You know, you are gonna struggle on small kites and on kites that aren't designed for power. You really are. You're gonna like to be what other people will consider ridiculously overpowered. Now, for you, it won't be because you've got the weight to hold it down, the ballast, for want of a better word. Not insulting you there, mate. I've got ballast as well to hold it down. So yeah, don't stress it. Take it out. If you can hold it down and you're happy with it and it works, do it. You know, it's fine. As I say, a lot of the people giving that advice, I'm sure, are smaller people. Because I would have given that advice 5 years ago. And I was giving that advice and I realized, damn, I've been doing it wrong all these years. Big guys, you've just got to, and this is why we, you know, in the school, we always had some kites that were just huge. And we never used them. We'd roll them out once or twice a year for the 120, 130 kg guys that came down. Right, you're going to need this monster. Go and knock yourself out. And they didn't, literally, you know, but they all loved it. They all got on with it a lot better. So not a problem at all, mate. Yeah, I think that's probably your problem, Paul. I think get that back foot around. And again, try and play with the fins a little bit just to see if it is that. I'd say try and take the back fin off, see how it works. Because I did it and suddenly was like, oh my God, I can get it all the way around. And suddenly the whole world opened up for me. So yeah, I would definitely suggest trying that. Yeah, exactly. You 17 got up on the first attempt. So do that. Do that. Do what works. You know, this is kind of the thing. It's kite surfing especially, I think, because it's so condition based, i.e., you know, the wind, the waves, the waves, the current, all these different things. There's no one way of doing it. You know, what works for you works, you know. Nice one, Paul. See you soon, mate. See you in October, hopefully. What works for you works, mate. And that's bottom line, you know. And it took me a long time to realize this because I like things to be, no, this is the process. You know, that works for him. Great. Let's go with it. Right. So, that's it. My tea time. Perfect. Cool, guys. Well, thank you very much for today. Awesome session. Really, really enjoyed that one. Thank you very much indeed. As I say, we'll be doing this again next week. For those of you who are watching the replay of this, if you want kind of, you know, questions and stuff like that during the week, go and join the Facebook group, facebook.com/groups/Tantrum Kitesurf. If you're already a member of the group, I will see you in there over the next few days. We will be back at the same time next week, exactly the same time, same place. We're going to keep these on YouTube now because the chat works really, really well, and this is perfect. Yeah, Tomic, exactly. You know, you will find and again, it depends where you're riding and what the wind's like where you're riding. But if it works for you, perfect. And as I say, to me, and again, this is based on nothing but my kind of what I've seen is that in kite design there is a huge difference between some. And obviously, I mean, it's 30 kilos, but in this kind of top end of the range, you know, the difference between the 30 kilos from 90 to 120 kgs. Is huge, whereas from 60 to 90 it's not so big, you know, because that's your 95th percentile, you know. So again, as you get kind of over that 90, 100 kgs, you really do have to start cranking up the size of your kite. Yeah, for sure. So okay, guys, thank you very much for your time. Thank you for being here, much appreciated. Really enjoyed answering your questions, and we'll hope to see you all next week or on some far-flung beach somewhere rocking it. Nice one. See you soon, guys. Goodbye.